Hi, I'm Ishtiyaque, a second-year PhD student at University of California at Santa Barbara. Today, I'm going to talk about how you can have a voice call with your friend without anyone else in the world knowing that you two are talking. This is important because voice calls are ubiquitous and they are also private. When we make a voice call using WhatsApp or FaceTime, we often talk about sensitive information. And many of today's service providers respect this sensitivity and hide the content using end-to-end encryption. Suppose Alice and Bob are talking using such a system. Then before Alice sends any voice message to Bob, she can encrypt the message using a key which is known only to Bob. Then Alice sends the encrypted packet to the server forwards that to Bob. Bob can decrypt it and retrieve Alice's message. Even though the server stores the encrypted message, it has no idea about the content hidden in it. So the content remains private. Now the question is, does end-to-end encryption provide enough privacy? The simple answer is no. There are certain information associated with a voice call that cannot be encrypted. For example, in this scenario, the server knows that Alice and Bob are talking. The server also knows the time and duration of the call. These pieces of information, also known as voice call metadata, can be extremely revealing. In fact, voice call metadata can be as revealing as the content itself. Former NSA General Counsel Stuart Baker has said, metadata absolutely tells everything about somebody's life. If you have enough metadata, you don't really need the content. To understand the leaking power of voice call metadata, let us take a look at a real-life example. In 2016, a group at Stanford University led by Jonathan Mayers conducted a study. They collected voice call metadata of a number of participants and analyzed them. They found that one particular user received a long phone call from a cardiology group in a nearby medical center, then made a phone call at a nearby medical laboratory, and over the time made several brief phone calls to a hotline that provides support for cardiac arrhythmia monitoring devices. Without any idea about the content of these conversations, the authors could correctly infer that the participant is suffering from cardiac arrhythmia. Voice call metadata can be used as a strong tool for mass surveillance by nation states and government agencies. In 2015, Australian federal government passed a bill asking all the internet service providers to store metadata of their clients. Later, it was found that it was possible to find the link between the journalists and their sources just by analyzing this metadata, and thus revealing the identity of whistleblowers. From all these examples, it is evident that just hiding the content of a voice call is not enough. We must hide voice call metadata in order to provide sufficient privacy to the users. Now the question is it even possible to hide voice call metadata in the presence of a strong adversary like nation states or government agencies who can practically control and compromise the entire communication infrastructure? There has been some work to solve this problem in the recent past. Unfortunately, the existing works either don't scale much or they do not provide enough privacy. A family of work uses Lightning Cryptographers Network to hide voice call metadata. From a high level, they broadcast the messages to all the users in the system. Even though they hide metadata unconditionally, these type of systems scale to only a few tens of users. Another prominent work that hide voice call metadata is Yodel that appeared in SSP 2019. Yodel scales to a few million users, but Yodel can tolerate only a 20% compromise of its infrastructure, which we believe is not enough in the presence of a strong adversary. We designed and implemented a new system, Addra, that can hide voice call metadata without any trust assumption. Addra can tolerate a strong adversary that can compromise any network component, including routers, switches, or server machines. Even if the adversary actively manipulates and injects network traffic, Addra can hide metadata from such an adversary. And providing all these privacy guarantees, Addra scales up to 32,000 users. Designing such a system comes up with two key challenges. The first challenge is to break the link between the participants in a call. If there are many users talking with each other over the internet, and if one particular user, Alice, is talking with Bob, then the system should deploy it such a way that any adversary cannot say whether Alice is talking with Bob, Charlie, or any other user in the system. The second challenge is to scale up the system while keeping the latency low. When Alice sends a voice packet to Bob, she first pushes the packet to the network. Then the packet goes to some protocol to break the link between Alice and Bob, and then finally Bob receives the packet. Voice calls are expected to provide an experience of real-time conversation. So for voice calls, these message transfer latency must be reasonably low. Addra comes up with two key contributions to address each of these challenges. For the first challenge of unlinking the caller and callee, Addra proposes a new communication architecture that takes advantage of a popular cryptographic scheme known as private information retrieval. And to scale the system while keeping the latency low, we develop a new PIR scheme that is faster than the existing PIR schemes. Before going into any details of our contributions, I would like to give a high-level description of private information retrieval. Private information retrieval allows a client to retrieve an element from an untrusted server without letting the server know which element the client retrieved. For example, suppose an untrusted server holds a database of n elements indexed from 0 to n-1, and a client is interested in the element at index I. To retrieve the element using PIR, the client will construct a query with the index I. This query is an encoded encryption of the value I. The client sends the query to the server. The server has no idea about the value that is hidden in the query. The server performs some cryptographic operations with the database elements and the query to produce an answer, which is essentially an encryption of the value at index I. The server sends the answer back to the client, who can decode the answer and retrieve the desired element. Now I'll discuss the architecture of Addra from a high level. Addra consists of a single untrusted server to serve its users. An Addra server holds a mailbox for each of its users, just like a post office holds mailboxes for its clients. So if there are n users in Addra, an Addra server will hold n mailboxes. Each mailbox comes with an ID, which acts as the phone number of its owner. Traditional post offices use mailbox for incoming mails. In Addra, we invert this notion. An Addra user uses mailbox for outgoing packets. For example, if Alice is an Addra user who owns mailbox number 2 and she wants to send a voice packet to Bob, she will deposit this packet to her mailbox, that is mailbox number 2. On the other hand, Bob will retrieve this packet using PIR. Since Bob knows the phone number of Alice, Bob can construct a PIR query for mailbox 2 and send the query to the server. The server generates PIR response, and Bob can decode this response. These voice packets are end-to-end encrypted, so anyone else retrieving from Alice's mailbox will not be able to comprehend the packet. So if Alice wants to send a voice packet to another user, say Charlie, then Alice follows the same protocol, deposits it into her mailbox, and Charlie retrieves it using PIR. Since Alice always deposits the outgoing voice packets into the same mailbox, an adversary cannot tell whom Alice is talking to. And on the other side, since a receiver retrieves the voice packet using PIR, it is not possible to tell which mailbox the receiver is retrieving from. Thus, the link between the sender and receiver of a voice packet is broken. This simple architecture comes with several advantages in the context of voice calls. The first advantage is a single query can be reused for the entire duration of a voice call. Voice calls usually last for a while, and there is a stream of voice packets exchanged between the participants. So during a voice call with Alice, Bob is expected to retrieve a stream of voice packets. But Bob doesn't need to send a separate query to retrieve each of these packets. Instead, Bob can just construct a query at the beginning of the conversation and send it to the server. The server can use this same query to transfer all of Alice's voice packets to Bob during the conversation. The second advantage is one message can be transferred from Alice to Bob just using 2 hops. Alice can send the message to the server, and the server pushes the PIR response to Bob. This keeps the network transfer latency to an optimal level, which is crucial for voice calls. The second challenge we faced was scaling up the system while keeping the latency low. The latency to transfer a voice packet from Alice to Bob has 2 key components: the network transfer time and the processing time. Alice first sends the voice packet to the server, then the server does the PIR processing, and then pushes the response back to Bob. The processing time depends on number of users in the system. As number of users increase, the processing time increases. Because PIR processing time increases as the number of elements in the database increase. This processing time also has a strict time budget. Suppose Alice is sending a voice packet to the server every 500 milliseconds. Then the server must process this packet within the next 500 milliseconds. Because if the server consistently takes 600 milliseconds to process the packet, then Alice's packets will start queuing up at the server, and the latency of transfer will grow up unboundedly and make the system infeasible for voice call. The receive time, on the other hand, depends on the size of the response. A bigger response takes longer to be transferred from the server to Bob. XPIR and CPIR are two state-of-the-art PIR schemes. Both of them have a tension between the processing time and the response size they produce. As a result, there is a trade-off between the processing time and the receive time. But Addra requires both of them to be low. To solve this problem, we develop a new PIR scheme, FastPIR. FastPIR is faster than both XPIR and CPIR, and at the same time keeps the response size reasonably small. FastPIR uses BFB homomorphic encryption scheme. It uses batching and homomorphic rotation operations to keep the response size smaller and response generation time faster. We also adapt two novel techniques to optimize homomorphic rotation operation. Due to limitation of time, I will not go over in details with FastPIR techniques. FastPIR techniques are available in our paper. Now I will briefly discuss some key performance evaluations of our work. Since latency is the most crucial metric for a voice call, the first evaluation question I'm going to answer is, what is Addra's latency performance? To measure latency, we deployed Addra server over a cluster of machines in AWS US East region. We varied the number of Addra users from 4,000 to 64,000. We deployed a portion of the users in a geographically apart data center in US West, and the rest were simulated by the server. We made all the users to take part in voice call at the same time and measured the 99 percentile latency experienced by the real clients. Since there is no prior work that support metadata-private voice call in a completely untrusted infrastructure, we compared Addra's performance with that of Pang, which is a system that hides metadata for text messaging in the same threat model. Pang has two variants, one Pang with XPIR that appeared in OSDI 16 and Pang with CPIR that appeared in SMP 18. Each of these variants were deployed for two versions, one optimized for processing time and another optimized for response size. The black line in the graph shows how Addra's latency changes with the increase in number of users. As the number of users increase, the server needs more time to do the PIR processing, so the latency also increases. This graph also shows how Addra's latency compared to that of the baselines. The first version of each baseline is optimized for response size, and the second version is optimized for processing time. The latency is shown in log scale. Prior works have shown that it is possible to make voice calls if the end-to-end latency is below 1 second. When Addra is run with 32,000 users, the end-to-end latency is 726 milliseconds. So Addra can support voice call for 32,000 users. And this time is better than the best variant of Pang by a factor of 7. The second evaluation question I'm going to answer is how FastPIR compares with the state-of-the-art PIR schemes XPIR and CPIR. And to measure this, we populated the PIR database with 1 million elements, where each element is of size 256 bytes. The table summarizes the comparison of the PIR schemes. Evidently, FastPIR has the least processing time out of all the baselines. In fact, the second best is a variant of XPIR, which takes twice as much time as FastPIR to generate the answer, with a reasonably larger response size. To summarize, hiding voice call metadata is crucial for providing privacy. And Addra can hide voice call metadata with its two novel techniques, the new mailbox architecture and FastPIR. And Addra can hide voice call metadata for 32,000 users with an end-to-end latency of 726 milliseconds. With that, I conclude. Thanks.